Hello everyone and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends over at ESRI. I'm Barbary Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, joined by our Assistant Webinar Producer, Lynette Qualia. Thank you to our loyal geospatial community for stopping by directionsmag.com often for articles, news, and of course, more webinars. We are excited to have Michael and Arthi with us today. They are going to talk to us about ArcGIS Workflow Manager and how we can improve our operations with some great tools. So, Michael, Arthi, welcome. We're glad to have you with us today and excited to learn more.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for having us as well. So my name's Michael Broadbent. I'm the product manager for ArcGIS Workflow Manager. And with me today is one of our senior product engineers as well, Arthi Dwarakanath.
Hello, everybody.
And we'll be presenting a little bit on some of our new service-driven architecture for Workflow Manager and some of the problems that it solves and features that it offers. Arthi has some really great demos for us today as well to showcase some of that functionality. She is here in person, as you heard, but those will be recorded demos just so that we could get everything squeezed in time. So let's kickstart the presentation here. So I'm going to spend a bit of time overviewing what Workflow Manager is and a few different use cases. So we're going to be talking about some submission and approval use cases on the web, a little bit specific to permitting, but there's a lot of opportunity there for things like incident reporting and data submission and requests as well. Data editing on the utility network, parcel fabric or pipeline referencing, so handling things like new data input, service drops, infrastructure build out from design through to construction. And we'll talk a little bit about some of our more automated use cases around automated orchestration. So having a system that will perform most of the work for you and really just bring a user's attention when it's required. And so we'll show you some about that. Get a little bit into some of the configuration and how to monitor some of the work that's in progress, then some of the roadmap, and then we'll finish it off by trying to answer as many questions as we can. So please feel free to drop those into the chat. We'll get those curated and start to mow through those. If we don't get through all of them, then we'll make sure to provide some additional resources outside of this presentation where you can get the answers. So who are we? We are ESRI's solution for scalable enterprise workflow management systems. So we help organizations automate and simplify many aspects of performing and managing repeatable GIS and non-GIS work in an organization. So one of the key things to think about there are those repeatable processes. So they tend to follow this simple 4-stage pattern where work is submitted, the submission is reviewed, we complete our work, and then we have some results that are delivered. And the steps to perform this work may be on the web or in desktop. They may occur in distributed work environments with a mixture of manual or automated activities. And really any type of work kind of can be grouped up into this simple 4-stage process. So they may include as well different people with different levels of training and understanding in different software products. They might occur in parallel. And once you have a process, it can be challenging really to scale it. So it's not very to make a process to work once, but it can be challenging to make it work 100 times, 1,000 times without some sort of system that can help coordinate the people, the resources, and the data to complete it and still maintain the consistent productivity and quality that you're expecting. So oftentimes, bottlenecks in the process can get magnified, and that means that the process is going to slow down, mistakes happen, quality drops. And so this is where Workflow Manager comes in. So we're ESRI's solution for coming in and streamlining a production process, typically a GIS process, but they can be non-GIS processes as well, and really act as the orchestration factory of these types of workflows. So what kind of use cases do we do this for? Well, all sorts really. There's data submission and review, We have a huge presence in national mapping historically. Change management is very important, editing for utilities, incident management as well. So all the functionality that we put together is all in service of these types of workflows that are brought into a variety of different industries. So hopefully you see something that you recognize on this screen related to something that you do on a daily basis. The benefits of using Workflow Manager. So when you're using a central system to kind of store all the information and distribute it out accordingly, you're not having a lot of copy and paste errors across, say, Excel or use of different systems. So you're going to improve data quality overall by centralizing it. Having a consistent process to follow that's communicated across your organization sets expectations, which increases trust. It reduces risk for those product managers when they're going in trying to estimate how much work can be performed. We increase employee satisfaction, so really trying to reduce and eliminate a lot of the manually repetitive work that goes into the daily work that we do. Really try and focus users on the parts that they enjoy, maybe analysis or evaluation rather than just data preparation and basic processes. Overall, by doing some of these things, we can reduce production costs because it's more streamlined. It's also a great way to improve knowledge transfer. So a lot of times the understanding of the process lives within a senior or senior members of the staff, or it lives in a wiki or documentation that's a bit outdated. When it's actually built into the process itself, then it provides an effective way of leading your staff and also bringing in new staff or buffering the blow of losing a staff, because your process becomes the vehicle for doing your knowledge transfer. One of the things that makes us unique as well is that we have location-enabled workflows. So there's lots of systems out there for work management and productivity. What makes Workflow Manager unique is really being able to associate that location of the work to the job and then be able to use that within the ESRI ecosystem. So bringing it into things like geoprocessing, using it for things like reporting. That's one of the things that really makes us unique over some of the systems that are out there. So we've historically released a geodatabase deployment known now as Workflow Manager Classic, and it's primarily been focused on cadastral mapping. So this deployment is still supported and successful. Hopefully some of you are using it today, and we hope you're still loving it and benefiting from all the work we put in recently to finish some of the functional parity between Classic and ArcMap and Classic and Pro as well. So that's now a Pro-only solution that's available for you. And then last year, we released the new stuff, the Servicedriven deployment, which is going to be the body of what I talk about today, what Arthi and I talk about today. And it's focused on some new use cases, tight integration with ArcGIS Enterprise, and really some areas of differentiation so that we could mature the technology gradually. If you're using Classic, it may be appropriate to consider transitioning at some point, depending on your use case and feature requirements. And if you're new to us, we ask that you think really about this opportunity first for some of your use cases and some of the things that you'll see today. So with that, I'll focus a little more on the service-driven. Our ultimate vision with it is to allow organizations to create their own seamless end-to-end workflows across ArcGIS for completing work. So whether processes take people from web to mobile or desktop through purely automated activities and out again, really we want to be that glue to the ArcGIS technology, the nervous system to repeated processes. So you can see here in the graphic, we have a piece of work that started on the web and it proceeds into mobile. You may have some automated activities in server and then some review in desktop and then push back up to the web. So being able to streamline a process like this and have different paths and routing is kind of some of what we're trying to accomplish and is our ultimate vision. To back this vision, we released the service-driven architecture. So it's a new capability server with instances of Workflow Manager available as workflow items. A new web app with web pages focused on specific tasks like performing, monitoring, and administrating the system and work that goes on in the system. We have a new Pro extension for those specifically performing editing and analysis in Pro. So it's a nice lightweight opportunity. And then while still also maintaining some of the extensibility opportunities for those of you who want to build your own apps and widgets. The users of the system are licensed not via the server itself, so not based on cores, but instead based on user type extension licenses. So this is very similar to what you might be familiar with the new utility network or parcel mapping fabric. Some of the benefits of the new system over some of the things we've done previously, performance is a key one. So not just performance of the actions, but also responsiveness of the applications that connect. So making everything really performant was a key motivator for us, as well ease of use, so trying to make it simple and easy to understand without a lot of need to turn to the help as much as possible. Resilient and easily deployable and upgradable. Further integration within the platform, so maps, apps, data, things that you can bring into workflows, really make that as streamlined as possible. And then we have a lot of new capabilities, new features specifically for some of the web-based workflows, new capabilities on the web that you've never seen before if you're familiar with Workflow Manager Classic, and you'll see some of those today. All right, so let's take a look at this through the eyes of a demonstration. So we're going to start with one of our demonstrations today, submission and approval workflows on the web. These are really good examples of that 4-stage process that I talked about before. So submission, review, completion, and delivering products. So that is common to most organizations. And some uses might be taking in boundary adjustments, doing permitting, taking in data submission, or actually requesting data from a contractor. And in this case, what we're going to do is look at it from the eyes of a permit submission and review. So I'd like to show you how, with a little bit of GIS analysis, you can guide the submitter without the organization having to perform a lot of additional work. So in a use case like a permit, it might be relevant if the work were close to a water source, and if no, then it could proceed. And if it was, then you would need to do some additional analysis, like fill in some forms and things like that. So this will be showcasing from the perspective of the submitter, kind of getting into that workflow and making that submission, and the system will guide you. And as I mentioned, Arthi will be doing the demos. Here we go.
Thanks, Michael. You can easily access Workflow Manager from ArcGIS Enterprise. Once you have your workflow server configured and your license set up, just look for the Workflow Manager icon in the app launcher for ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Clicking on it will take you to our Open Item page. This is where you'll access items that were created for you or create a new item. For this demo, I'll be using an existing item. Once in, you'll be taken to our work page. And like the name suggests, this is where all the work happens. On the work page, you can find, filter, and run work that is assigned to you. You can see that I have 2 job queries, my jobs and my group jobs, to easily find jobs that are assigned to me or my group. We have out-of-the-box filters available here to filter through some of our jobs. High priority, that tells you jobs that have a high priority, jobs that were created in the last 24 hours, or jobs that are past their due date. You can also see that there are a few jobs that are already assigned to me. I can either start a new step or resume a step that I was working on yesterday. For our demo today, I'll be creating new work using the Create Job panel. You can find the Create Job panel on the left here. You'll see a few different job types available here for us to create jobs off of. For today's demo, I'll be creating a submission process for an environmental review. The work page will automatically update to show me the new job that is now ready for me to be worked on. And just like a regular submission process, I'll be asked to fill out some information here. We'll put in our name, the area that we'll be working in. You'll notice that the Proceed button is grayed out. This is because the required fields haven't been filled out. As soon as I fill out the required fields, the Proceed button will be enabled. Let's fill out all the other information that's on here. All right, we'll proceed to our next step. This is a real quick way to gather business-specific information related to our process. And not just that, you can also now quickly update default job properties like the start date, the due date, the priority, and status using this step. And everything that you see on here is all configured by my admin. While this feature is useful, we do recognize and understand that it may not fulfill all the needs for data validation. And so for that, at 10.9, we introduced integration with Survey123. This brings in all of the Survey123 capabilities like constraining, validating, and all the different fields that are supported by Survey123. You can see that my email address is being validated as I type. You can also add multiple pages, capture digital signature, and utilize all of the cool functionality offered by Survey123 without ever leaving Workflow Manager. Let's go ahead and sign our submission. And voila, my survey has now been submitted. Before we move on to the next step, I want to show you that when I submitted the survey, not only did it create a survey record, but it also linked the survey record with this job. And so you can see our first step that we filled out, and then the survey form that we filled out. This is useful because now these properties can be used anywhere in the workflow to act as an input for steps like emails, GP services, and guide a decision using arcade expression. And beyond Survey123, this capability can be extended to integrate with feature layers as well. All right, we'll move on to defining a location now, and I'll pick an area that should be fairly wet. And locations don't always have to be polygons. They can be points, polylines. You can also select existing features to be the location for your job. All right, we'll move on to our next step here. Another new feature that we added at 10.9 is linked attachments. This can be a link to your shared or network drive, or link to an FTP or a OneDrive website. For this demo, I'll be adding an embedded attachment, which is a PDF document with information about my construction plan. Let's move on. Now, we've collected a lot of information in the past few minutes. Our location and properties will now be automatically evaluated to see if they're in proximity to any critical layers using a GP service. And looks like our area of construction is within 50 feet of wetland. No surprises here. And based on the result of my GP service, I will now be tasked to complete a few more steps and answer a few more questions here. So we'll go ahead and fill that out. And we'll move on to our next step. Before we submit our submission, I want to take a moment to take a look at the job details panel. The properties that we just filled out are a little bit different from the initial project information we collected. These are one-to-many properties. What that means is these properties can have multiple values for this one job. For example, if a field crew is being sent out to do some maintenance work, these fields will have different values before and after the maintenance, but they're all associated with this one request. You can add and edit those values using the same job details panel. All right, now that our request is submitted, it looks like an email confirmation was sent out. Let's see if we actually got that email. This email was automatically sent out when our submission was submitted. As you can see, the email captured some of the job-related information like the job name, the proximity to the wetlands automatically. This was done using arcade expressions. Information captured in Workflow Manager is saved under the hood to be used as input for different steps throughout the job. We'll learn a little more about it in our next demos. Back to you, Michael.
All right, thanks, Arthi. So you saw a little bit of the submission process, gathering information from the submitter, performing some geoprocessing analysis to guide them based on the submission's location, some of that Survey 123 integration and how that information could be extracted automatically into an email. We did see some of the questions that have come in, so we're going to keep those towards the end of the presentation, but really good questions, so please keep firing those off. And then just as part of the demo, we saw as well, after the submission, we could continue on to the review stage. And if the review passed, the request would be completed and delivered. Really is an end-to-end process constructed in Workflow Manager. So take a moment, think of the ways in which you gather information to perform your work in GIS. How do you evaluate that? How do you work with it? And how would you get it done? And really, you'll realize just how common this type of workflow is, and that submission and approval, even though in this case it's for a permit, could be really applied to a lot of different use cases. Also, how this information is captured, it doesn't have to be done manually. It could be programmatically generated from another system and then submitted into Workflow Manager as well. All right, so let's take a look at another scenario here, switching gears a little bit to be a little more GIS focused. Let's look at some data editing for utility network, parcel fabric, pipeline referencing. So you're gonna get a little taste of what we can do in Pro as well. It was really important for us to create a service-driven workflow manager to match all the new service-driven data structures that exist and really create an experience that could orchestrate these workflows across Pro and the web seamlessly. So there are lots of data editing activities from service drops and changeouts, changing the map, route and event updates, infrastructure design and construction. And so in this scenario, we're going to actually ingest a newly installed fire hydrant in ArcGIS Pro and QC it on the web. All this will be triggered by, all this was triggered by webhook and Survey 123 used by the field crew. And so that's another enhancement that we have. Survey 123 webhooks can now be automatically consumed inside of Workflow Manager. And I'm going to turn it over here again to Arthi, and she can show us some of what that looks like.
Thanks, Michael. We'll go back to our work page again. And as Michael mentioned, the field crew submission triggered job creation in Workflow Manager. This job was automatically created using webhooks, which is why all of the survey information is already linked to the job and ready for me to review. And since I'm only reviewing this information, the survey was opened in view-only mode. I will proceed to my next step. I'll add some comments for tracking purposes, just like I did on my previous job. A version was created automatically for this job, and all the steps assigned to me now are done, and this job has now been reassigned to the editors group. Let's change our scenery a bit and access the same Workflow Manager item in Pro. This time, we'll log in as one of the editors who primarily works in ArcGIS Pro, updating and editing different data using all the different mapping capabilities available in Pro. To connect to your Workflow Manager item here, create a connection to your portal, and then look for the Workflow Manager icon on the View ribbon. Clicking on the Workflow pane will open up the Workflow pane. You can see the Workflow pane has some predefined search queries similar to what we saw on the work page. These searches are all dynamic and can be adjusted to one's needs. For example, I have mine set up to easily find jobs that are assigned to the network analyst group. On that note, I see a job ready for me to work on. So once I run this step, it will automatically update the assignment from the group to me. The step that I just ran here is called the Open Pro Item step. This step will automatically open a pre-configured map. It will zoom in to the job's location for the new fire hydrant. And last but not the least, it will repoint all the layers in the map to the new version created specifically for this job. Because we know better than to make edits directly to the default version. By doing some of the heavy lifting, Workflow Manager makes it really easy for me to focus on my task at hand, which is to make my edits to add a new fire hydrant. I'll use my pre-configured utility editing template to add this hydrant. And because I'm using this editing template, some of my attribute values have automatically been populated. I think I'm done making my edits, so we'll go back to the workflow pane and mark this step as finished. I'll save my edits before we move on, of course. As a part of finishing this step, Workflow Manager will automatically close the map and reset it back to its original state. Looks like there are more steps for me to run, so I'll go on and continue with my job. Add some comments here for my QC person. All right, proceed to our next step. I think my edits were solid, so we'll go ahead and submit. And while I was making these edits, I got an email notification about a new job that is now assigned to me. So I'll go back to my jobs, and here it is. Before I run the next step, I would like to show Pro and the Workflow Manager web application side by side here to see how they get updated at the same time. The service-based architecture allows for all instances of work to be updated in real time. And so multiple people can work in the same system and consume all of the same information at the same time. This is really helpful when your workforce is located in different locations. We'll go back to Pro now. This job is similar to our previous one in that it's using the same map, but you can right away tell there's some big differences. The job's location is different. The version where all the layers have been repointed to are also different. Workflow Manager makes it really easy to switch between different jobs and work on them at the same time. I won't make any edits right now, and we'll come back to this at a later time. I'll take off my editor hat and go back to the work page, this time as a reviewer to review edits. I see a job ready to be QC'd, and instead of Pro, I'll be using a web editing application to review the edits. Similar to Pro, a map is opened up with the job's version and is now zoomed in to the new feature that was added by my editor. This is a very simple review. In the real world, you could have the same map open up in Pro, run some validation rules using Error Inspector, We also have the job details panel available here on the right. You can see the different job properties associated with the job, like the survey record. We can take a look at the job's location. We can also look at all the attachments that were added along the way. If the job panel is taking too much room, you can always minimize it. We'll go ahead and finish this step, and we're automatically taken back to the work page. I'll say yes for reconcile and post. It looks like our reconcile and post GP step is on a scheduled hold. What that means is that this hold will be released at a scheduled time and the GP step will automatically be run at that time. We'll learn a little more about step scheduling in our next demo. Back to you, Michael.
All right, thanks, Arthi. So now you've seen one example of an edit carried through the field to Pro and through the web for utilities use case. And you've seen how seamless Workflow Manager can make that experience. So also notice how much of that manual repetitive preparation work has been taken care of for the user. So it's easy to transfer work responsibilities from the field to the editing to QC. Really no issues finding or seeing the work's location, no manual repointing of the job's version, right? All that was taken care of. The tasks open automatically. So really preparing the user with the correct expectations for the type of work that was being performed. Instant synchronization between what the users in Pro are seeing and what the people in the web are seeing. So with a distributed workforce, that's really effective. And then use of step scheduling to retask certain actions to off network hours. And that can be used not just for geoprocessing, but also for things like scheduling future work after this data edit is performed. Really lots of different use cases, and we actually extend that further at the release that's coming out, and I'll mention a bit about that later on. So you also saw the interaction with field, picking up the Survey123 webhook to create the Workflow Manager job, which is what Arthi had used to carry the job forward in the first place. So pretty cool stuff. Now, there are maybe use cases where in the workflow you want to task a field crew with something to perform some field work, and that's not something that Arthi showed, but you can use that same open web app step that was shown to actually open ArcGIS Workforce inside of ArcGIS Pro or on the web. A little animation here that shows it. And that can be used by your production coordinator or someone to really allocate that field crew out to perform some work related to the job. So over time, this is going to be something that we're trying to enhance. We're working with the field team at the moment so that there's even tighter integration and ideally a step within the workflow that could create a workforce assignment and really dictate some of that field work as well. All right, so if you'd like to see another utilities-based example or just another example that kind of shows that infrastructure design workflow, we actually have the telecommunication team who made a really great YouTube video showing a network design example. So creating the design in Pro, tasking the field, performing the work, integrating some web apps for QC and review the results on the web. And so I'd encourage you to check that out and their sample as well. I'll mention it again at the end of the presentation, but in YouTube you can search for telecommunication workflow manager and it'll pop up as well. And I encourage you to check that one out. It's very well done. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, talk a bit more about automated orchestrated workflows. So specifically automated data processing. So you can see again, that original 4-stage review process modeled out, but now some of the activities are replaced by more automated ones. So the submission of the work could be done via web request, webhook, by monitoring FTP sites on a schedule, for example, or other data sources for changes, maybe OneDrive and things of that nature. We have review. At least a cursory review could be done with geoprocessing or attribute rules, things of that nature, and the submission automatically reviewed, accepted, or rejected in that way. Completion could primarily be based on automated processes, but when required, could retask to a user when that process isn't working out. So depending on the terrain or the process that we're working on, the conditions of our automation may not be met, and so we need to insert a person into the experience. This is popular when you're trying to, say, train a machine learning process, or your automated attribute rule validation shows that there are more complex errors than the automation can resolve, and so you can redirect traffic accordingly. So these kind of concepts aren't for everyone, so don't feel pressured that we're saying it's for you necessarily, but if you have a large system where Workflow Manager could be involved, it could be the orchestration component really in the center of it all, trying to create that more automated system where people are brought into the process only as required and not excessive. So these types of use cases may be appropriate. So if you have a lot of data ingestion, really more than you can handle on your own manually, you work with a lot of partners or contractors taking in or providing contributions to you. You have really sudden flurries of activity that have tight delivery turnaround. So it may not be that you have a steady pipeline of a lot of work, but you suddenly get flooded at times and need that extra support. We continue to make new functionality with every release to support these types of systems. So step scheduling that Arthi showed just before is one such example, and I'll show you some more on our roadmap. And that a lot of that functionality gets grouped under our advanced server role license. And so it isn't available just with a single user type extension. It does fall into the more the advanced category of our server. All right, let's switch gears once more. We're on the home stretch now. Let's talk about building workflows. So we've seen how some of these processes come together as possible use cases, but really how do we build that process inside of Workflow Manager? We do so in our diagram designer, so combining predefined step types that we have in our library with paths to author this business process. And we're going to show you a little bit about that. Also, you may be wondering what happens when you start to accumulate a lot of pieces of work in the system. So how can you manage all those pieces of work effectively? We have a page for that as well. So this is our manage page. This is where a production coordinator can go and evaluate the progress of work in the system using queries and searches. But with the additional ability to actually make changes to those jobs if they need to. And really, it's kind of like an advanced dashboard for visualization as well as updating work in the system. And so I'm going to switch over now to show this demo. One of the things that's important is Arthi had to just make sure that the screen resolution and size of the videos was acceptable for streaming. So in this case, some of the functionality does look a little bit condensed. And so just know that when you actually would play around with it in a real scenario, you would have a lot more real estate for some of the visualization here. All right, with that, I will pass it over to Arthi.
Thanks, Michael. We're back on the web app again. This time, you'll see two additional tabs called the Design page and the Manage page. And we'll get to the Manage page here in a minute. But we've run two different jobs as two different personas, one in the web app and the other one in Pro. Now we'll actually see how these diagrams for the jobs were configured. You can see some of the initial steps that we ran, like the Survey 123 step that opened up a survey in view-only mode. We added some comments. We opened a pre-configured map in ArcGIS Pro. We also answered some questions. In this case, if we had said no instead of yes, the job would have automatically rerouted back to the editor instead of the reviewer. Results from steps like these and the Run GP service step are all stored under the hood in Workflow Manager as output values. And output values can be accessed at any point in the diagram using arcade expression to guide multiple decisions throughout the job. Now, we left our last demo with the GP step scheduled to run at 11 p.m. Step scheduling is a new feature at 10.9. We also added a step called Wait on Failure, which is set to run 2 minutes after the GP step. So now if my GP step fails, we have this step that will run and then go back to the GP step and try to run it again. Step scheduling makes it really easy to schedule long-running, resource-intensive processes to run after hours. We'll now go back to the design page to create a brand new diagram. I want to create a new diagram for the vacation request process in my organization. We'll start by giving the diagram a name. We'll then start mapping out the steps using just manual steps to figure out the process. We will want to collect some information from the submitter. We'll then want to ask them if they're ready to submit. This will then be sent out to a reviewer or a manager for review. We'll ask the manager to either approve or deny the request. We'll then want to send an email to everybody that was involved in the process. Now we'll replace these manual steps with actual steps. So here comes the question steps. Then we have the send email step to send that email to everybody involved. We'll ask the submitter to fill out some properties here. This could also be a Survey 123 form. We can also now add labels in our diagrams for further information. This was newly introduced at 10.9. Now that my diagram is ready, I can print it out and send it to my team for further consideration. Super easy, right? We'll end our demo by doing an overview of our last page, which is the Manage page. Based on some usability feedback we received, we've made quite a few changes here to make it more accessible. We have a shortcut available to quickly take a look at our searches. We still have the job panel available on the left here to look for specific jobs or create new jobs like we did on the work page. We have a filter option to restrict the results that you see in the map. And we have our colorful, easy to use summary charts available to look at some of our job properties. These are all configured, and you can also set your own color schemes. You can expand the job list to see more jobs available in the search. You can switch between the map only view or job list only, or have it both available like I do here on my screen. I can click on one of these locations to get more information about the job. I can also zoom into the job's location by clicking on the button right here. And not just that, the locations are all colorized based on the different job properties. And like I said, these charts are all configurable and you can pick your own coloring scheme. So I can very easily, based on the colors, tell which job has a high priority. All of this information is quickly available at your fingertip on the Manage page. I'll now use the Manage page to make some updates to a job assigned to my group. I'll use the Details panel to add a step hold for the step in my job. Holds are a good way to stop people from running a step. And holds can be added for many reasons like budget constraints, technical issues, issues with resources. And once the hold is resolved, you can easily remove it by clicking on the Release Hold button. You can also update other default properties like priority, the status, the step due date, and start date using the Details panel. Manage page is a good way to get an overall picture of everything that is going on in your organization. Back to you, Michael.
Great, thank you, Arthi. And thank you for all your contributions today and generously making all these videos so that we could fit it into the time. Always much appreciated. So you've seen how easy it is to build those workflows, visualize the process, get buy-in from stakeholders in your organization, and really build up those diagrams in complexity to perform advanced functions or decision trees just based on what your process is in your organization using some of our predefined step types in our library. And we're always adding new steps to our library. I'll talk a little bit about some of the ones that are coming out in the next release. Then we saw a little bit on the manage page. So some of the great features we offer production coordinators for managing and interacting with the jobs that are in progress. So for some simpler reporting views, you might actually use ArcGIS Dashboard instead if you have more high-level stakeholders, and really give them some simple heads-up displays of job activity. And then when you need more of a deeper interactive view, you can use the manage page for the personas that are responsible for that type of work. All right, we now officially are on the home stretch, and then we will be kicking it into questions here. So just as a quick review, we had some of the key features that you've seen today are shown on screen. This is a good one to kind of take a snap of from the camera feature of this video. So things like tracking the workflow location, controlling user access, seeing job assignment, capturing job properties. They're all part of some of the exciting initiatives that we've done to date. Some of the exciting initiatives that we're working on are shown on screen. So things like scheduling jobs to run on a particular schedule. So scheduling job creation, which is great for things like inspections, social media style commenting, introduction of web requests, which I'll show in a second. We also have multi-machine support coming out. And then some of the other priorities in near term will be coming out at the next release. But then if you look at midterm, we are focused on things like further integration with the field apps. Hopefully that can be pushed up, and ultimately something along the lines of an ArcGIS Online implementation as well. So just as a quick preview though, one of the steps that's coming out in the next release is the web request step. So this is going to allow you to integrate with third-party systems through the workflows. So you'd actually be able to drop in a web request step as part of that process, send the request, parse the response, and use parts of that output to either guide steps or populate information. So you could send a request out, say, to a geocoder service that returns GeoJSON, and that can then be turned into the job's location or fed into a GP service. So this is coming out at 10.9.1, which is a fall release of this year. So something exciting. Also coming out is an evaluate data quality step. So this is something that would trigger attribute rules, data reviewer rules, topology rules, calculation rules on a service. So if you've using one of those service-based feature layers, then you can author those rules, have them configured, run it as part of the workflow when you receive a data submission and have appended it. And then you can use that as a way to reject the submission, push it through to auto adjustment, or maybe if there were quite a few errors, have a manual review. These will be demonstrated with a couple of new types of demos that we haven't really done a lot of specifically. So you'll see an incident management presentation coming out, as well as a data submission and review, and that'll be showcasing some of our new functionality. These types of workflows are possible today, but we're continue to add and enhance them as time goes on. And that's one of the advantages really of using Workflow Manager as a COTS-based ESRI supported system is we maintain it, we add to it, we really take your feedback seriously on what features we need to build, and that's one of those advantages than trying to pull off something custom. So some of the resources we have are available on the screen. They're also available in a handout that's attached to the presentation. So we do have an updated product page. We do have blogs. If you're interested in getting started, you can do that on YouTube as well. We have that telecom infrastructure design demo. And with that, I will take some of the questions. Arthi, what ones would you like to start off with?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for sticking around. I hope you're as excited about these new features as we are to show them off. So we'll start with the questions. Our first question is the license named user license in Portal, or are there other enterprise licenses available for this new Workflow Manager?
Yeah, so the user type extension is available inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, and so that's licensing basically a user's access for the service. There's still as well the Pro desktop extension, so that's available too for those folks who want to do work in Pro. When you purchase a Pro license, then you also get that user type extension license included. And then the other licensing component is that advanced server capability, which provides access to some of those more advanced features like step scheduling and some others in the workflow.
Thank you. The next question is, could you please provide some non-GIS use cases where we can use Workflow Manager?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So generally speaking, organizations start with something that is more GIS based, but they do trickle into other departments with organizations. Really, a lot of the time, the departments that we start with become kind of our biggest advocates. So we've seen some administrative workflows grow from kind of initial conception. We've seen just generic change management workflows related to following a set process and adjusting to new technology changes that are completely outside of the ESRI realm. System integration, really trying to be an orchestration across different systems, depending on what APIs are available or database access in those other systems has also been a generic workflow that we've seen. We do tend to lean in, at least initially, to those GIS workflows, but certainly there are opportunities outside of GIS as well.
When a job goes to or proceeds to a next step, can it be assigned to a group instead of a single user, where multiple users are assigned to a single step, and that way, if any person in the group could pick up the job for that step?
Yeah, absolutely. You can assign to a user or you can assign to a group of users. And the explanation that was provided in that question, I mean, is absolutely perfect. You could almost put it into our help documentation for why you would want to do that. You basically assign work to a pool of people, and then as they become available, they can assign it to themselves. You can search on it. I believe, Arthi, you showed that in your Pro demonstration. You can search on that work based on the group that you're a member of, and then assign it to yourself. And it's a really nice way of kind of establishing a queue of work on a particular step.
Do we need to open ArcGIS Pro manually, or will it be launched automatically?
At the moment, you have to open it manually. So you would open the project that you would want to work with, and we can then open the resources that are in that project. We're currently in R&D phase for being able to open Pro from outside, both from the web as well as from sort of within Pro to switch projects. We don't have that coming out at the next release, but we are pretty optimistic that we'll have it out at the following release, so more of like a UC of next year timeframe, user conference of next year. So that is a request that we've received a lot of interest in. It is something that we're prioritizing. It's a little bit tricky, but we're making a lot of good good progress in that regard.
Has the scheduling functionality been extended to ArcGIS Workforce? One of the barriers to adoption has been not being able to pre-schedule inspections at an interval. Does Workflow Manager solve this issue? Please comment on integration between Workflow Manager and Workforce, especially related to scheduling.
Gotcha. So we did mention a little bit about ArcGIS Workforce, so you can use the Open App step to open, the Workforce dashboard, so that a production coordinator or someone could task a specific field crew with work based on the job's location. We are working with that team and the field apps team around the new field apps offerings for when Workforce is included, so that Workforce could be a step in our workflow. And we're pretty excited about that. I absolutely agree that Workflow Manager is an opportunity to assist with some of the scheduling of reoccurring things like inspections or other field work. So there's a couple ways to do that. Currently using step scheduling, so you could actually put it into your workflow, that as one inspection wraps up, that it would create the next inspection based on the properties that are in that job. It could also be something that is scheduled outside of the system that's coming out in the next release. So there's opportunities, I would say, for how this could be streamlined for sure.
How can Workflow Manager be integrated with third-party or external business systems like ERP systems or payment gateways?
Yeah, it's always a really popular question. For us, it's really a matter of what do those other systems offer in terms of APIs, data access, for opportunities to actually integrate with them. So we do have a Python API that can be used to integrate with we do have a Python API. It can be used, published as a service that's run by the workflow to sync with another service if it's accessible with the Python API. I mentioned as well recently about our progress in making a web request step that goes into the workflow. We also intend on making that kind of a webhook integration point as well in the future. But there's usually a lot of opportunity. It's really just dependent on what the other system offers for those integration points.
And this will be our last question for today. Could you talk a bit about the security available on the roles and the privileges and users and how it works with Workflow Manager?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have a system of application level privileges and sharing that's separate from ArcGIS Enterprise. So as you interact with the system based on the groups that your users are a member of, you can give them application level privileges so that they can create work or be blocked from creating work, for example, or see that job panel or not see the job panel in the user interface. And so as a Workflow Manager administrator, which at a portal level is just a publisher level, you get to configure those privileges inside of the Workflow Manager system. And then also we support sharing of the different types of work. So you can say that this type of work is only exposed to this group of users or these groups of users. And then similarly, you can share the searches that are available to different groups. So if you have different departments or different groups within the same department using the system, you have a lot of opportunity to really tailor it for that organization. And if you have completely separate departments who want their own independent system, then you can create multiple workflow items that exist on ArcGIS Enterprise, and they are self-contained Workflow Manager systems despite using the same underlying technology.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you again, everybody, for sticking around for these questions. I do apologize if we didn't get to your questions. We will be reaching out to you individually if your questions weren't answered. And also thank you to Barbary and Lynette for letting us do this session. Back to you, Barbary. Sorry.
One thing that we could also do as well is formalize some of the answers to particularly the ones that we haven't gotten to and make that available on our Workflow Manager ESRI community page. So you can use one of the links that we have to get to that as well.
Thanks again to Arthi and Michael for sharing their expertise. We hope that you go make it a great day. Tell a friend about ESRI and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.